The Dome of the Rock is among Jerusalem's most sacred spaces. It crowns a sacred hill known to Jews and Christians as the Temple Mount. The Dome of the Rock stands on the Temple Mount. This place is a sacred site for many major religions, including Christianity and Islam. Here, recent events that shocked the world have occurred. Before we dig deeper into this story, there's a little question I want to ask you. Let's try to answer. What significant event is associated with the Dome of the Rock in Christian tradition? A, the birthplace of Jesus. B, the birthplace of Moses. C, the crucifixion of Jesus. D, the baptism place of Jesus. Time to think. Can wait to see your answer below. So let's back to one of the most important holy places in the world. Talking about this holy place, this information might surprise you. The spot upon which the Dome of the Rock stands has a greater history than the building itself. It begins close to 3,000 years ago with the construction of the first Jewish temple. The temple stood for over 400 years before falling at the hands of the Babylonians. The second Jewish temple also stood more than 400 years before the Romans laid siege on Jerusalem and turned it to rubble. While the Romans held control over the site, they supposedly built a pagan temple. However, some scholars believe this temple was located elsewhere in the city. Over the centuries, the pagan shrines on the Temple Mount crumbled. Later, Jerusalem came under the control of Muslim armies. They didn't build the Dome of the Rock instantly, but a few leaders later. Eventually, Caliph Abd al-Malik built the Dome of the Rock. But that's not the end of the story. In 1099, a pilgrimage of armed Christians wrestled away the Holy Land from the Muslims during a series of holy wars known as the Crusades. A cross was placed atop the Dome of the Rock and converted into a church known as the But Jerusalem changed hands again in 1187, when an Ottoman army headed by Saladin captured it from the Christians. Saladin destroyed the Christian buildings, removing the cross atop the Dome of the Rock and replacing it with a crescent. It has remained the same since. Currently, non-Muslims are banned from entering. Attention history of Israel-Palestine for Muslims. The compound hosts Islam's third holiest site, Al-Aqsa Mosque, and the Dome of the Rock, a 7th century structure believed to be where the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven. The compound is also where Jews believe the biblical Jewish temples once stood and is known to them as Temple Mount. The contested site has been the focal point of the decades-long Israeli occupation of the West Bank. Recently, tensions in Jerusalem have flared after Israeli police attacked worshippers in the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound overnight during the holy month of Ramadan. Why would armed security forces enter a mosque? Israeli police said in a statement that they were forced to enter the compound after masked agitators locked themselves inside the mosque with fireworks, sticks, and stones. When the police entered, stones were thrown at them and fireworks were fired from inside the mosque by a large group of agitators. The statement said, adding that a police officer was wounded in the leg. The Israeli police also said that according to a prior agreement with the Al-Aqsa compound authorities, no one was to spend the night inside the compound during the month of Ramadan. The police said they peacefully tried to convince people to leave, but when that didn't happen, they forced their way into Al-Aqsa, said Al Jazeera's Natasha Ghanim. Has this happened before? In recent years, the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound has been an annual flashpoint during Ramadan, holy place at the heart of Israel-Hamas conflict. As per the Jews, the compound is where once the biblical Jewish temple stood. The western wall of the compound, known as the Wailing Wall to Jews, is considered as the last remnant of the Second Temple. However, the Muslims believe it is the Al-Buraq Wall, where Al-Buraq, the animal upon which Prophet Muhammad ascended to the sky. The Jews further consider the Temple Mount as their holiest site because they believe that their first temple was built by King Solomon 3,000 years ago. Because of different beliefs, conflict is inevitable. When Hamas fired a barrage of rockets on Israel as its citizens slept in calmness on the fate day in October, the terror group announced it as the beginning of Operation Al-Aqsa Flood. As the sudden attacks that targeted civilians inside Israel quickly took the shape of yet another war, what remained as a focal point of tension between Israel and Palestine was the Al-Aqsa. a place which always found itself in the conflict between Arabs and Jews. As per a report, the operation was planned and named Al-Aqsa Flood by the mastermind of the attack, Mohammed Daif, in retaliation for raids carried out at Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque by Israel. Daif started planning the attack in May 2021, after the Arab and Muslim world were left enraged by a raid carried out by Israel. On Al-Aqsa Mosque, it was triggered by scenes and footage of Israel storming Al-Aqsa Mosque during Ramadan, beating worshippers, attacking them, dragging elderly and young men out of the mosque. All this fueled and ignited the anger. A source was quoted as saying, "In Gaza, this is a terror attack that needs to be condemned." Terror is terror. All over the world, throughout history, you can see that Israel's citizens unite in difficult situations. People help each other and they become stronger when facing difficulties. However, this is not the first time Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is part of a larger compound located in the old city of Jerusalem, has been drawn into a conflict. The disputed mosque complex has been at the center of the Israel-Palestine conflict for years. The contested site became a matter of concern after East Jerusalem went under the control of Israel after the Six-Day War in 1967. Officially, the control of the mosque and its area was given by Israel to an Islamic group. However, the Israeli forces were allowed to visit the site and also gave permission to Christian pilgrims to visit the Temple Mount, which is considered as holy by them, also for its connection with events in the life of Jesus Christ. A new tunnel was opened near the compound of the Al-Aqsa Mosque in 1996, which was seen by Palestinians as a violation of their sacred site. This led to clashes which resulted in more than 80 deaths in just 3 days. Israel's then opposition leader Ariel Sharon, along with a group of Israeli lawmakers, visited the Temple Mount complex in 2000. After 2005, some Jewish religious factions demanded that more rights should be granted to them for visiting the place and expressed their aspiration of reconstructing an old temple in place of the Dome of the Rock, which they believed once stood there, further sparking controversy and debate. The tensions reached a crucial point in 2014 after the assault on Yehuda Glick, who was a Jewish religious leader. Responding to the attack, Israel closed the access to Al-Aqsa, a step which was not taken since 1967. Palestinians were already restricted from entering the compound by Israelis through various methods, like building the separation wall in the early 2000s, which stops Palestinians from the West Bank from getting entry into Israel. In March and April of 2014, tear gas and stun grenades were used by the Israeli police against Palestinians within Al-Aqsa, which drew international condemnation. This ignited protests by Palestinians, which soon turned into violent clashes and marked the start of the second Palestinian uprising called the Al-Aqsa Intifada. The clashes at the site of Al-Aqsa Mosque in 2021 also triggered a 10-day war with Gaza. Both Muslims and Jews complained that they don't have the right to pray on the holiest planet, and both use violence. Violence can sometimes break the mold and trigger negotiations. If that happens, perhaps the situation at the holy places will improve. Can Israel avoid sparking a holy war? Al-Aqsa has become an important political symbol of autonomy for both Arab, Christian, and Muslim Palestinians, and Al-Aqsa is in danger has become a powerful recruiting slogan for Muslim fundamentalists and Palestinian nationalists alike. Rock-throwing youths often battle with Israeli police during religious holidays. Meanwhile, as Israel has tilted right and grown more religious, an increasing number of Jews demand to pray at Judaism's holiest site, a stone's throw from the Western Wall. They argue that denying them this right is tantamount to religious persecution. Amit Halevi, a member of Israel's ruling coalition, declared God's house is everyone's house. He called for Israel to partition the compound, forcing Muslims to relinquish the northern area that includes the Dome of the Rock, which he contends is the place on which the temple stood, though no one knows the precise locations of the ancient sanctuaries. His justification is simple. The Temple Mount is ours. The Palestinian Ministry of Jerusalem Affairs predictably warned, the implementation of this plan will lead to religious war. That war may now have begun. Hamas is eager to use both real and imagined threats against this place of pilgrimage to galvanize support for its bloody campaign throughout the Muslim world. It is sobering to recall that the last time Muslims were expelled from Al-Aqsa, it sparked a century of war that ended up uniting a fractious Islamic world. By taking any change to today's status quo off the table, religious extremists on both sides will be served notice. They cannot be allowed to use quarrels over God's house to bring more ruin and destruction to an area that billions around the world honor as a holy land. The Dome of the Rock is destroyed. Why didn't Israel destroy the Dome of the Rock after the Six-Day War, like they did with the Sheikh-Eyed Mosque in Moroccan quarters? Before we answer this question, if you look at the Charter of Israel's independence, you can see it will guarantee freedom of religion, conscience, language, education, and culture. It will safeguard the holy places of all religions, so it would not be strange if Israel promotes peace and minimizes further conflicts that will occur here. Israel respects archaeological sites and holy sites of all ethnicities and religions. Unlike some sects and regimes, neither the Jewish religion nor the Israeli government wantonly and purposely destroys the archaeological record of non-Jewish predecessors, nor seeks to erase currently existing active holy sites of other religions. Freedom of religion is the law in Israel, and Israel protects the holy sites of all religions, making them accessible. Tomorrow, all please note that the Sheikh-Eyed Mosque, actually a madrasa or house of Islamic study, was destroyed to rubble by Jordan in the 1948 war they launched against the existence of Israel. When Israel cleared architectural rubble and slum dwellings from the Maghrabi Quarter, the rubble of the previously destroyed and nearly forgotten mosque was part of what was cleared away. For one thing, even at the most generous interpretation, the Moroccan quarter was never more than a tiny sliver of tenements lying between the Jewish quarter of the old city of Jerusalem and the Jews' revered Western Wall, the last standing remnant of the temple in Jerusalem that had been destroyed by Titus in 70 CE. No more than a handful of families ever lived there, though their apartments had been built within 3 or 4 meters from the Western Wall. And the residents continually harassed the Jews of the Jewish quarter when they passed through the narrow alleyways that were the only public access to the wall to gather and pray there. Both the Jewish quarter and the Moroccan quarter were largely destroyed in the fighting. During the period of illegal Jordanian occupation from 1948-1967, Jordan completed the intentional destruction of whatever Jewish structures remained in the portions of Jerusalem that had come under Jordanian military control, built outdoor urinals along the Western Wall, using Jewish gravestones as tiles, and generally sought to erase all traces of any Jewish presence in the walled Old City, which meant those Jews whose families had lived in and owned property in the Old City for thousands of years were forcibly expelled from the city, or killed by Jordanian forces to achieve a completely Jew-free, ethnically cleansed Old City during those 19 years. What Israel did when it recaptured the Old City and defending itself against renewed Jordanian aggression in 1967 was to raze all of these newly built Jordanian structures that had been thrown up adjacent to the Western Wall and clear the rubble that had sat there in other portions of the area adjacent to the wall, as unattended to by Jordan as any other rubbish heap for those 19 years, in order to reestablish the Jewish quarter, restore the Jewish landowners of that area to their rightful possession, and open up the space in front of the Western Wall for Jewish worship in Jordan, without interference from the handful of Muslim families who had occupied the long since destroyed by war Moroccan quarter. If Jordan had not started the war in 1948, the Moroccan quarter would not have fallen victim to the shelling and bombing, mostly Jordanian, that occurred in the 1948-49 war. If Jordan had not joined the war in 1967, but had stayed neutral when Egypt and Syria again threatened Israel with utter destruction, the buildings Jordan had erected in the Jewish quarter to replace and erase the former Jewish presence, they would not have come back into Israeli hands either. But that's not when the destruction of the Sheikh-Eyed Mosque occurred. Those who bemoan the destruction of historic Muslim buildings in the area have no one but the aggressive Arab armies to blame. All Israel did, when it regained control in 1967, was clear out newly built slums and dung heaps to restore the sanctity of the holiest place on earth, where Jews may openly pray. In any event, in a city as ancient as Jerusalem, there are many archaeological layers. Underneath the cleared rubble of the madrasa was an even more ancient Roman street, which is now available for study and tourism. We're not getting into an argument over which was more important, or even whether it is okay to intentionally destroy more recent archaeological layers to be able to dig down to deeper, older layers. The site had already been destroyed by Jordanian attacks in 1948. But it is simply a slander and a lie for the purveyors of this story to elected Israel, intentionally and in cold blood, after the 1967 war was over, destroyed a functioning Muslim holy site out of revenge, hatred, or spite. Or even to allege that Israel intentionally destroyed a valuable archaeological site out of revenge, hatred, or spite. The only thing that really indisputably happened is that Israel asked its Antiquities Authority to clear away the rubble that had been adjacent to the Western Wall for 19 years, along with garbage dumps and urinals that Jordan had put in that location, with due regard to preservation of anything of archaeological significance they came across, so that the areas could be reconverted to a holy place of prayer. In doing so, part of the rubble which they cleared apparently belonged to a formerly existing Muslim school that nobody, not even the Muslims, recognized as important at the time. It took a great deal of clever historical detective work by the investigators mentioned in the article to even confirm that madrasa in question was what had once been there, the Third Temple. While reality has not yet surpassed imagination, the countdown for the prospective Third Temple has now entered a state of acceleration. In the book The Third Temple by author Yishai Sarid, to paint a picture of what is happening and what is planned regarding the replacement of the alleged Aqsa Square, the author took the apocalyptic speeches of end-of-time activists, literally after 20 years since the assassination of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin by a fanatic from these movements, after recounting the history of the Holy Temple and its destruction for the first time in 586 BC by the Babylonians. Then the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD. During Rome's suppression of the Jewish uprising, the writer pointed out that the memory of these two events has been associated with the Western Wall, or what is now called the Wailing Wall. If Israel retained in 1967 the Mosque Square, or the Noble Sanctuary in Arabic, or the Temple Mount in English, it, according to the writer, forcibly destroyed the Moroccan neighborhood adjacent to the Western Wall and forcibly designated it for Jewish worship. Later, it allowed them to enter the areas of the sanctuary and perform their prayers there under police protection. The author mentioned the establishment of movements associated with the temple, such as the Salvation Movement and the Believers of the Temple Group and the Temple Institute, which is closely linked to American evangelicals. It was founded in 1992 in the Old City of Jerusalem and occasionally raises some problems with its attacks on the Noble Sanctuary. The Temple Institute even brought 5 completely red high-fours from Texas, whose ashes were ritually purified for the temple. This was Donan, the Noble Sanctuary area, paving the way for the construction of the Third Temple. Jews have been waiting 2 millennia for the revival of the temple. Members of the Orthodox Jewish group claim to be descendants of the biblical tribe of Levi, which performed hymns and music at the holy site. When the temple will be built, we will ask the Levites to come sing, and they won't know. They have to learn. Director of the men-only choir created a few months ago by the Temple Institute. Members of the Orthodox Jewish choir claim lineage to a biblical tribe which performed hymns at the temple. Members of the Orthodox Jewish choir claim lineage to a biblical tribe which performed hymns at the temple. Founded in 1987, the Institute aims to rebuild the temple, training choirs and clerics, and making objects for use in religious rites. Rebuilding the Third Temple is the wish of many Israelis. But it seems that this is not very feasible. If the temple really had to be built, it would be like this sacred place would become a place that 2 forces fought over and destroyed, so people wonder, can the Third Temple be built without destroying the Dome of the Rock? The answer is maybe yes. A new Jewish interfaith initiative hopes to show that Jews' end of days vision could harmoniously accommodate Islam's present architectural hegemony on the Temple Mount. An initiative launched argues building the third Jewish temple in Jerusalem would not necessitate the destruction of the Dome of the Rock. God's Holy Mountain Vision Project hopes to diffuse religious strife by showing that Jews' end of days vision could harmoniously accommodate Islam's present architectural hegemony on the Temple Mount. This vision of religious shrines in peaceful proximity can transform the Temple Mount from a place of contention to its original sacred role as a place of worship shared by Jews, Muslims, and Christians. Said Yoav Frankel, director of the initiative. However, both Muslims and Jews have expressed opposition to the initiative. They said it was pointless to talk about what would happen when the Mahdi, the Muslim equivalent of the Messiah, would reveal himself. Even Jews believe that it is prohibited to rebuild the temple until the Messiah comes. So what is there to talk about if he will decide whether or not to rebuild the temple? If he decides that it should be rebuilt, people will go out to the Temple Mount and help carry the rocks. Mainstream Orthodox rabbis have opposed attempts to rebuild the temple since the Mount came under Israeli control in 1967. The chief rabbinate of Israel even issued a decree prohibiting Jews from entering the area due to ritual purity issues. However, several grassroots organizations have called to take steps to renew the sacrifices on the Temple Mount and rebuild the temple. However, time will have to wait to see whether these projects come true or not. What if the third Jewish temple was built atop the Dome of the Rock? It is true that in the Middle East, one building is often found to be built on top of an older one, but that is not going to happen. The temple will be built hopefully soon, and quite likely covering the foundation stone over which the dome currently stands. However, a number of things are likely to have to happen in order for that to happen. To be possible, such as, for example, the arrival of the real Messiah who will signify the end of the current world order way things are going. The world needs this now more than ever, but Christians will wait daily for his arrival, however long it takes. Everything is God's will. If he allows it, it will happen.